new iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Pro are here, with 4 models still at very, very close price points, with $100 separating the iPhone 15 Plus and the iPhone 15 Pro, and with normal phones and Pro phones having the same exact screen size, similar 48 megapixel camera systems, and both coming with new USB-C ports. The decision on what phone you should buy might actually be more confusing than ever. Thankfully, for you stumbled on this video, and I'm gonna walk you through not only what iPhone 15 you should buy, but the differences between all of these models, and also mistakes that you should avoid to ensure you get the best iPhone model, because there's kind of a lot Apple didn't tell you. All right, the first thing you can't really be fooled by is battery life. And if you expected the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max to have the best battery life out of all the iPhones this year like I did, well, you would have already been fooled, because it's not really the case, kinda, with an exception. Because the iPhone 15 Pro still has a 120Hz dynamic refresh rate that can lower the refresh rate all the way down to 1Hz. So most of the time when you're scrolling or interacting with the phone, you are using more battery life, and when you're not using the phone, like when you're staring at it, you are saving battery life. So for the Pro models, the biggest benefit for this is when watching video, because the iPhone can lower the refresh rate if the video is 30 or 24 frames per second to that exact refresh rate, resulting in longer battery life when you're watching video, because it doesn't have to run at full 60 Hz. However, if you look at the official battery life ratings, you'll notice that the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max don't win in audio playback. Basically, what that is saying is that if you have the iPhone screens off while you're listening to music, well, then the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus will both last 5 hours longer than their iPhone 15 Pro counterparts. Long story short, don't be fooled into thinking the iPhone 15 Pro Max has the best battery life just because it's the biggest, most expensive iPhone. It is likely that the physical batteries in the normal iPhone 15 models are actually bigger than the 15 Pro models, and depending on how you use your device, you could potentially get more battery life out of a normal 15 model. Now, unlike last year, the iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Pro look very similar to each other thanks to the regular 15 models getting the dynamic island, and with both phones having the same 6.1 and 6.7 inch displays, this year the phones are even closer because both phones can now get up to 2000 nits of max brightness during outdoor use, and both OLED displays appear near identical in terms of display specs, except for a few notable areas. First of all, I kind of alluded to this before, but the regular iPhone 15 still just have a 60 Hz display, while the Pro models have an adaptive 120 Hz refresh rate. This 120 Hz display makes the phones look smoother because the screen refreshes twice as much, meaning that scrolling, animations, and even video games that utilize higher frame rates can look smoother on the iPhone 15 Pro. Furthermore, the iPhone 15 still does not have an always-on display that Apple introduced last year on the iPhone 14 Pro. And I think this is especially important this year thanks to Apple's new standby feature, which can turn your iPhone into a smart display when you're charging it horizontally. Thankfully, one thing that isn't as drastic as last year is the weight difference between the phones. That's thanks to Apple switching over to a lighter titanium material on the Pro models, making them the lightest Pro models yet. So now the iPhone 15 weighs 171 grams, while the 15 Pro weighs 187 grams, with the Plus weighing 201 grams, compared to the Pro Max at 221 grams. So while the 15 weighs about the same as the 14, the Pro phones have come down about 19 grams in weight. It's funny because stainless steel was so heavy last year that the 14 Plus was actually lighter than a regular sized iPhone 14 Pro. This year though, the iPhone 15 Pro is lighter than the 15 Plus model. Now, that's not the only difference for the design though, because the iPhone 15 Pro has smaller bezels than the iPhone 15, and if you look at the tech specs, you'll even see that the iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Pro, despite having the same screen sizes as the 15 and 15 Plus, actually have smaller dimensions. Yeah, it's not by much, but technically the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max are physically smaller devices, and I'm happy to hear that, especially with that bigger Pro Max model. Any size reduction for that, I'm grateful for. Another design difference this year is that the iPhone 15 still has a standard mute switch that has been with us since iPhones have been a thing, but for the first time ever, Apple is removing the mute switch on the iPhone 15 Pro and replacing it with an all-new action button. Now, by default, this will still toggle the mute function on your iPhone, but Apple actually gives you control over this action button to map it to other features. Examples include quick access to voice memos, activating the flashlight, activating Do Not Disturb, going into accessibility settings, going into translation, and other features like quickly launching the camera, as well as full access to Apple's shortcut feature, meaning you could really have the action button do any command that you want on the iPhone 15 Pro. Now, a huge change this year for the iPhone is this year, Apple is getting rid of the Lightning port connector that has been on iPhones for like the past decade in favor of a new USB-C port on both iPhone models. And while you would think there would be nothing to be fooled by here with both phones having USB-C, well, you'd be wrong, because there's a difference here. So the iPhone 15's USB-C port, it's kind of slow. It's still only rated for USB 2.0 speeds at 480 megabits per second, or literally the same speed as the Lightning cable. The iPhone 15 Pro, on the other hand, gets a much better USB-C port and does not suffer from these slower speeds, with the iPhone 15 Pro's USB-C port getting 20 times faster data transfer speed thanks to its 10 gigabit per second capable USB 3 port. Now listen, if you just use your iPhone's port for charging, both of these ports are going to do the exact same thing. But if you are someone that plans on taking a lot of photos and videos, and then you plan on transferring them over to your computer to like edit them, then you'll really benefit from those faster speeds on the iPhone 15 Pro's USB-C port. And there's even another benefit for that USB-C port on the Pro models that I'll talk about a little bit later in the photo section of this video. Now, something that is just like last year is that the iPhone 15 will not be receiving the same chip as the 15 Pro. However, unlike last year, where the iPhone 14 literally had the same A15 architecture as the iPhone 13, this year there is a difference with the iPhone 15 getting the A16 chip from last year's iPhone 14 Pro. So a little bit of an improvement there, rather than literally sticking us on the same chip. Now, that A16 chip, it's no slouch, right? It is super fast. It enables a bunch of computational photography features on the iPhone 15. And for normal day-to-day tasks and even heavy tasks like video editing or photo editing, the iPhone 15 is going to be fast, and it's going to be fast for years to come. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't any benefit going over to the iPhone 15 Pro. In fact, there's a big benefit this year because Apple is the first smartphone company to be using a new 3nm chip process, and they are putting that into the iPhone 15 Pro. And this new chip architecture looks really, really impressive, so impressive that Apple isn't calling this the A17 chip. They are putting their stake in the ground. They are saying this is the A17 Pro chip. Now listen, we don't know the full power of this chip quite yet, or even how much it will boost day-to-day performance over the A16 chip, but I kind of want to go over Apple specs here, because in terms of CPU power, this A17 Pro chip is actually just a modest bump according to Apple, at just a 10% performance gain. So yeah, it should be a bit faster than the A16 in that department, but that wasn't really the focus of the A17 Pro chip, because Apple really spent a lot of the time going over the immense graphics gains on this new chip, with Apple touting a 20% performance boost over the A16 in terms of GPU power, with 4 times faster ray tracing than the A16 chip. Now, in previous years, I might say, oh, a better GPU. That could mean some games could possibly take advantage of that GPU power, maybe give you higher resolution or better frame rates, but no. Apple came out here guns a-blazing, and they literally showed off console-level games like Resident Evil Village and Resident Evil 4 Remake being played on the iPhone 15 Pro, and they even promised that the new Assassin's Creed game would launch on the iPhone 15 Pro right alongside the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X version. And not like a different version of the game, like the actual console game coming to the iPhone 15 Pro. So if you are a gamer, or you plan on getting into what seems like a new era for iPhone gaming, with actual console-level games coming to the iPhone, I can't believe I'm saying that, this alone should weigh heavily in your decision, because it seems like these games will be playable only on the iPhone 15 Pro and not the regular models. All right, finally, let's address the big decision maker, the cameras. Everyone loves a good camera, and this year, I think both phones are gonna have pretty good cameras. So at first glance, it appears that we are getting similar camera systems at least more similar than what we got last year with the 14 and 14 Pro. That's because this year Apple is bringing over the 48 megapixel camera system to the regular iPhone 15 model, where last year the 14 didn't get it. So not only is the iPhone 15 getting this new 48 megapixel camera system, but it actually has improvements over the 14 Pro's camera system with a new pixel binning mode that, instead of compressing those 48 megapixel shots down to 12 megapixels, will now instead bring the resolution down to 24 megapixels, meaning that every shot you take with the main camera will have double the resolution. Now, both the iPhone 15 and 15 Pro also have new computational photography features like auto portrait mode, where if your subject is a person or a dog or a cat, the iPhone 15 can automatically capture depth information, and then you can choose to see your photo as a portrait if you want. So basically, every time you take a photo and it can detect a subject, you also get a portrait mode photo that you can later select if you want that. I think that's pretty cool. So both phones seem to have good camera systems, at least on paper, but there are things left out on the normal 15 model. First of all, there is no dedicated zoom lens. Yes, you do have the 48 megapixel camera system, so you do have access to a sensor crop 2x mode that can simulate a 2x zoom, but there is no physical 3x or 5x lens. Secondly, while it does have an ultra-wide-angle lens, the iPhone 15's ultra-wide-angle lens still does not have autofocus and therefore does not have the macro camera mode found on the 15 Pro. And while the iPhone 15 does have a 48 megapixel camera system, it does not gain access to Apple's Pro RAW mode, which will allow you to get 48 megapixel RAW photos for more detail. Now, don't be too alarmed because you can still get full resolution 48 megapixel photos on the iPhone 15 with a new option called HEIF Max Photos. These HEIF Max Photos are basically compressed 48 megapixel photos, so they get the resolution of the full 48 megapixel camera system, but not necessarily all of the raw data that you would get from Apple's Pro RAW format, which remains exclusive to the 15 Pro. These HEIF Max Photos will take about 5 megabytes of data per photo, while the Pro RAW 48 megapixel photo can take around 75 megabytes per photo. It's also important to note, not only will the iPhone 15 Pro get access to Apple's Pro RAW, but it will still get access to this new HEIF Max mode as well. So even though most people won't be using Apple Pro RAW or even this new HEIF Max mode, it still stands true that the iPhone 15 Pro is a much more versatile camera system with the amount of formats that you can capture not only for photos, but for videos as well, because the 15 Pro still gets access to higher bitrate ProRes video, while the regular 15 does not. And to top it all off, the iPhone 15 Pro's faster USB-C port gives it a new feature where it can now connect to external storage and then record directly on external storage. And when you are recording on external storage, you can actually go past the iPhone's previous limitation of 4K 30 frames per second for ProRes video, all the way up to 4K 60 frames per second. So that is pretty cool and kind of crazy that we can just record video to external storage on the iPhone 15 Pro. I did not expect that feature at all. Finally, let's talk about iPhone 15 Pro versus Pro Max. Yeah, there's a few differences this year. The biggest being is the regular size Pro still comes with a 3x lens, which we've had on iPhone since the iPhone 13 Pro, while the Pro Max comes with a new 5x lens. Now, obviously, the 5x lens is going to be better at getting zoomed up pictures of subjects that are further away from your camera. But I do think it's important to note that the regular 15 Pro may have a weird advantage here when shooting photos from 3 to, I guess, 4.9x. In this small zoom range, the 15 Pro will be able to utilize a 3x camera, while the 15 Pro Max will have to entirely rely on digital zoom until it gets to that 5x camera. Personally, I think that's a trade-off I'm willing to make to get better zoom, especially given the 2x mode on these 48 megapixel camera systems. But if you currently like the 3x camera for framing shots that aren't necessarily super far away, well, you may actually have an advantage here with the regular iPhone 15 Pro over the Pro Max. Also, the 15 Pro does get a spatial camera feature as well, which you can then watch on the Apple Vision Pro. Not sure how many people are going to actually be affected by this buying decision, but hey, if you think you're going to buy an Apple Vision Pro in the future, you might want to get a 15 Pro so you can take spatial video. Another difference is pricing, and By that I mean the iPhone 15 Pro Max has no 128GB configuration, meaning that the starting price for this model is $1,199. Now yes, it's technically the same price as last year's 14 Pro Max with 256GB of storage, and the 15 and 15 Pro Max with 256GB of storage is only a $100 price difference. But yeah, if you really want to cheap out with an iPhone 15 Pro and you really don't use a lot of physical storage, well, you could save money and pick up a 15 Pro for still $999. Speaking of storage sizes, how much should you get? Well, if you're going for the normal iPhone 15 models, I do think you can make 128GB of storage work, especially with that new HEIF Max mode. So now you can get those full 48 megapixel resolution photos at about 5 megabytes per photo. That's not bad. And I know most people buying these like base level phones, they really don't need a lot of storage, but to be safe, I usually like to bump it up to at least 256GB of storage, but I do consider myself a power user, so I do think most people would be fine on the normal storage tier. For the Pro models though, listen, I know it's tempting to go for that $999 Pro model, get the 120GB of storage, save some money, but listen, these Pro phones, they have a lot of features. If you're planning to use the Pro camera features on any of these phones, whether that's Pro RAW or ProRes video, if it's ProRes video, you need to get a lot of storage, like 512GB, I feel like minimum. But yeah, you should probably be bumping up these storages on the Pro models to 256. I feel like there's a reason why Apple put the Pro Max model starting at 256GB of storage. So that would be my recommendation. I would spend the extra $100 and at least bump up the storage a little bit so you can make sure you can take advantage of all these cool photo features and not have to worry about running out of storage. As for what phones you should order, well, as always, it depends, right? Last year, I said the upgrades, they really focused on the Pro phones. It was all about the Pro phones last year. And this year, I don't think that. I think the 15 and 15 Plus look like very good phones and have upgrades that most people care about, with features that will appeal to most people who do not need the niche Pro iPhone features. Both phones have a similar design now, both phones have a 48 megapixel camera system, and the differences are less drastic than they were last year. So if you want to save $200, if the exclusive Pro features I mentioned in this video do not appeal to you, I say go for it, get a normal iPhone 15. However, if you are buying that iPhone 15 Plus model, I do have to be honest and say, I feel like for $100 more, the 15 Pro does seem like it's worth the extra money, and you get a lot more features for just $100 more. But hey, I get it. Most people only care about a few features, and like I said, those iPhone 15 Pro features, they're kind of niche, they aren't for everyone. So the biggest features that most people usually care about is number one, screen size. So the iPhone 15 Plus has a big 6.7-inch display, and then battery life. And yeah, we talked about it before. The iPhone 15 Plus might have the best battery life out of any iPhone model. Those are by far some of the most popular features when it comes to phones. So if you wanted to pick up an iPhone 15 Plus, especially now considering that if you wanted to get the bigger Pro Max iPhone, you would have a $300 price gap now between the iPhone 15 Plus and the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So in that sense, I can kind of see how the iPhone 15 Plus is actually more worth it than it was last year. With that being said, I think the iPhone 15 Pro series has a lot of great features that make it worth the higher cost. I love the new titanium frame, the action button, the faster USB-C port, and I'm really looking forward to testing out that 5x lens on the Pro Max model. And if you're a gamer, well, I feel like the iPhone 15 Pro is a no-brainer this year, and it should probably be the one you pick up. Personally, I plan on picking up an iPhone 15 Pro Max for myself this year, but let me know in the comments below after watching this video, what iPhone do you plan on buying? Also, let me know, was the video helpful between deciding between an iPhone 15 and an iPhone 15 Pro? And if it was, be sure to leave me a like. Make sure you subscribe to see my full review when I get these phones. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.